Hi everyone, my name is Pamela Redondo, and today we'll be talking about the IQ achievement discrepancy model versus the response to intervention model. So, first, we'll start with the origins of the discrepancy model and how it all started. So, firstly, it was introduced by Franzen in 1920. He associated the accomplishment quotient versus the intelligence quotient in the identification of learning disabilities. In 1965, Bateman stated a description of learning disability as follows: an educationally significant discrepancy between estimated intellectual potential and actual level of performance related to basic disorders in the learning process. This specific description was not used in the United States Office of Education, but in 1976, the U.S. Office of Education Regulations stated the following: a specific learning disability may be found if a child has a severe discrepancy between achievement and intellectual ability in one or more several areas of achievement. In 1977, the severe discrepancy formula to find out about the identification of learning disabilities was dismissed, but the discrepancy concept itself kept on being relevant in the identification of the learning disabilities. So the discrepancy model works by comparing two test scores. First, the test of general intelligence, the IQ test, versus an achievement test in a particular achievement area. So, in order to find out if a student has a learning disability, the scores between those two tests will have to have a difference of a minimum of 2 standard deviation, meaning at least 30 points or more. If you take a look at the graph in this normal curve, you can see that the IQ score of 100 compared to the reading score of 68 will indicate that this particular student has a learning disability in that achievement area. So that will be the way that it will indicate if a student will be benefited from learning through the special education strategies. And also, states have chosen different ways into approaching these methodologies. For example, there's the grade level deviation, where expected grade level score is compared to an actual grade level score that the student is portraying in their achievement. So there's different types of discrepancy models that can be used throughout across the country. So now let's take a look at the concerns. Usually students in lower grades cannot be identified through the use of this method. It is also said that this type of method indicated manipulable scores. So the IQ scores may vary depending on the instrument chosen to operate. So let's say, for example, verbal versus nonverbal, native language versus second language, which may demonstrate different scores. A student may do a higher IQ score in a nonverbal versus a verbal, or a student with linguistic variation can do a better IQ score from their native language versus their second language. Also, underachievement should not be confounded with learning disabilities. Now, let's take a look at the advantages of this model. Often, IQ scores and academic achievement go hand in hand, especially for reading skills, targeting essential information to identify a learning disability. It represents a crucial component of the identification of a learning disability. It is also easy to understand, objective, therefore easy accessibility to implement this approach. You will only have to administer this one time to identify a learning disability. So it's easy, it's effective, and objective. So I think that compels a lot of needing things to create a profound learning disability identification. Conclusion: why the discrepancy model continues to be relevant in the identification of learning disabilities. So I believe that it would be an error to eliminate the discrepancy model in the identification of learning disabilities, because I feel that it's a component that is essential and it gives you a better understanding of where the student is struggling. So I believe that it is a more comprehensive identification process. It may not lead exactly to the learning disability itself, but it does helps you construct the learning disability factors. So I believe that through this model, it can give you more detailed information on that specific student. It's easy, relevant, and I think it many times underachievement can be related to learning disabilities. It's not all the time, but it can be the case. So I think that implementing all the information that you acquire through tests can help into determining what is the best way to achieve such help for the student. So that's it. Thank you guys. And these are the references. So let's continue with the second part of this presentation.
So hi guys, my name is Randy. I'm going to be talking to you today about the RTI model. So the RTI model looks at a student's academic achievement or their behavior as a result of their instruction and how the student's performance changes or doesn't change as a result of this instruction or interventions that take place. The goal of this model is to provide quality instruction for all students, the target being struggling learners and students with potential learning disabilities. So how did the RTI model come about? This came about when new language was incorporated into the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, stating that in determining whether a child has a specific learning disability, states may rely on a process, as we're calling the RTI model, a process that determines whether the child responds to a scientific research-based intervention as a part of the evaluation. So this is what the RTI model looks like. It's made up of 3 tiers, and we're going to walk you guys through that right now. So Tier 1 incorporates the general student population, and this takes place before any intervention occurs. The idea here is that the students, all of the students, are receiving high quality instruction based on research-based practices and validated teaching methods. So Tier 2 interventions are provided for students who demonstrated problems or didn't quite meet the achievement standards in the Tier 1 group. So these students are going to receive additional support from their general education teacher or from other educational professionals to try to help them improve. The student's progress continues to be monitored at this point as well. So in Tier 3, interventions are for students who did not respond or didn't quite meet the academic achievement standards in Tier 2, according to the Tier 2 intervention efforts. The students who did not respond at these higher levels may be referred for special education services based on the progress monitoring data and just the data that was collected on them throughout the program. Okay, so here's a couple of the pros and cons of the RTI model. I'll start with the pros. So one thing that's really cool about this is it can be applied to all students. So it really takes in the general population and making sure that they're getting a high quality instruction. The RTI model reduces the number of falsely identified special education students. And it's based on frequent monitoring and data collection, which I think is really cool, that they're using research to really make decisions about the students. And the main goal of this is prevention. So they're really trying to catch those students who might have learning disabilities or who might even be at risk for falling behind or later on. So pretty much the cons in this for the RTI model all involve the lack of research and validation that we have on this model. So its use for identifying disabilities is questionable. And the next one kind of says the same thing, that there's just little research out there to actually let us know if this approach works for students. And I also read that it's not always followed appropriately in school. So, for example, students might spend a prolonged amount of time in Tier 2 when they need to be moved on to Tier 3 right away. And this can also be inappropriately influenced by parents or teachers. So there's a lot of say from the teachers and parents. So for me, the RTI model is kind of my choice. And it's mostly for two reasons. So as someone who really cares about science and doing research-based interventions, I find that this is really, really neat, that they're actually using the research and doing research on students to figure out what works. And I feel like this is really, that this model is maybe not perfect, but it's going in a good direction. And the second reason that I like this is because really the main goal is prevention. So I think it's really cool that they're trying to catch these learning disabilities in students who might be struggling early on. And I just think that's really cool. I think that this model may not be perfect, but it's definitely going in a good direction as far as I'm concerned. And there's my references. Have a good day, guys.